Hi, I'm called Greg Phillips. I work for QA Systems. We're based in Bath. We sell a tool called Cantata, which probably some of you know from its time at IPL. And we're calling this Intelligent Testing for Dummies, and the usual talk's called Intelligent Testing. So Intelligent Testing for Dummies, we're going to keep it very brief. Probably you know a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about already. Hopefully there'll be a couple of points of interest that maybe you don't know. So we're going to start at the beginning with dummies. Why are we testing? Well, you might have to. You're forced to. If you're in any of those industries, you're almost certainly going to be forced to test. And if that's the case, probably some of those things might mean something to you. Other good reasons to test, obviously, commercial risk, corporate brand reputation. People like Aston Martin last year had to recall 360 cars. Quite embarrassing. Toyota been in the news quite a lot for similar things. Litigation as well. Also, generally, obviously, we all hopefully appreciate tests early. It's a good idea. You can reduce the overall cost and increase your quality of your software too. All very good reasons. So my objectives, I'm a tester. What do I want? I want an easy life, really. That's what I'm looking for. I'd like to write tests in a language that I already know. I don't want to learn some odd scripting language that no one else has used. Hopefully the same language can be used to write my tests as I'm using for my source code too. I want a test harness that's easy to reuse across different projects. I want some results. Ultimately, someone's going to ask me to produce some results, either my boss or I'm going to need it for my certification. So where am I going to start? I have to write a system level test. I can call main. I can click some buttons on the UI. Probably not going to get me very far in terms of coverage. So we probably all know we need to break down the system into individual components and test those. It's called unit testing. I can call unit A, and it might get through to unit J. It's probably not going to though. So I'm going to need to pull out unit J and test it individually. Testing in isolation then. Problem, of course, is going to be dependencies. Unit J doesn't exist in isolation. It calls through to other things call through to it. We're probably all aware of mocking these days. What we're going to do is we're going to replace the actual call with something that looks a lot like it, obeys the same interface. Okay, so I'm going to write a whole bunch of tests for my components. Fairly easy, doesn't really prove anything though. I need to start from my requirements. Advantage of doing this, I can see if I've missed any of my requirements. Also, it can highlight unwanted unnecessary code if it's been over-engineered. If the code doesn't actually match your requirement, what's it doing? Okay, so I've started writing my tests. When do I stop? I'm going to stop on Friday at 5 o'clock. I'm going to stop when I'm bored. Stop at home time? No. I need to be able to measure what I'm doing. I need to have some analysis of my coverage. So not only from my unit J down the bottom, but I want to know an overall picture as well of how much of my code is actually being covered, exercised by my test cases. What's this going to look like? Well, in our tool, it looks a bit like that. We've got rule sets up there. What does that mean? Well, it means that if I'm writing for ISO 26262, for example, I can just click a button. I don't need to know what I need. Do I need statement, decision, basic block, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. I'll press the button, and those checks will be inserted into my test cases for me. Also, this has got a nice view. You can see it at whatever level you like. You want to be at the top level, the project level, the function level. Something else that's kind of cool if you're a developer, don't really like looking at all those numbers. I don't know what they all mean. I can look at my individual source code file here. It's pretty obvious what's going on. The green stuff's covered, the red stuff isn't. And the things in yellow, well, that if, as we've gone through one of the cases, but we haven't gone through both. So we haven't got through to the else there. Okay, so I've measured my coverage. What's it going to look like? Well, if you haven't checked it already, typically it's going to look like about 70%, possibly. You might be doing well. I want to get that up to my 100% that I need for my certification. I'm going to write a load of tests, hope for the best. Could do. One thing you can do, table-driven tests. It's going to make your life a lot easier. What's going on here? Well, we can vary the input parameters by specifying a range in this case. Range 10 to 20 with a delta of 3. Making a guess, but basically what I'm doing is I'm hitting it with a large amount of data and that's going to be a quick and easy win for increasing my coverage. What else can I do? Well, I can auto-generate tests. Possibly doesn't sound that useful, but you can use it for regression testing. It might be one use case. But another thing it's very useful for, though, is for filling those gaps in the coverage. If you can't work out how the hell you get down to a particular else statement, well, the tool can do it for you. Test optimization, that's another thing we can use. So our tool can check which tests actually are adding to coverage, highlight ones that aren't adding to the coverage, and we can either remove them, we can disable them, or delete them, which will help prevent maintenance nightmare. So are we there yet? We've analysed our coverage, tried to maximize it, we've optimized our tests. Well, we haven't looked at white box testing yet. We've only really been thinking about checking inputs and outputs. Black box testing, I'm sure you know. White box testing, the analogy usually is we're looking inside the box. So we're looking at the internal workings and structures. What does that look like then? Well, generally it's going to be a matter of having access to the bits of the code that are usually tricky to get to for your tests, the static data and static functions. What we're looking for really here, though, is it's unobtrusive. What we mean here is I don't want to put a hash if def in, I don't want to recompile anything, I don't want to put any code in there that's not of any use other than to the tests. So that's another use of our tool. Okay, so we've tested the individual components. We're fairly happy with them. We're going to look at putting the pieces together now, which of course means integration testing. Interesting thing about integration testing, sorry I clicked too soon there. Interesting thing there, of course, is the interaction, namely the interfaces between the components. So one tool we can use there is something we call wrapping. Wrapping is a way of intercepting calls. So we can check parameters going out. We can modify them if we wish. We can check the parameters being returned from a called object, and we can modify those if we want. And why is that useful? Well, particularly useful case is if you're making a call out to malloc, you're doing memory allocation. You want to know how your code copes when the memory allocation fails. We can actually return we can modify the return parameter so that malloc returns null in our test case and see what happens then. Very difficult to do without this technology. Okay, so we've got through to results. We've got many different views on the results. We've got a console output so you can see straight away what's going on. You can also have XML. You're going to need for your certification the ASCII text results. And more for the developer or the tester here really, we can check actual versus expected values and returns. And we can filter out passes if we wish to focus on problems. Okay, so very quickly through there. So we can analyze the coverage. We've got table-driven testing with large data sets passing through our code. We can auto-generate tests to fill up gaps where it's hard to understand what's going on. And we can optimize the tests, which means we can get the maximum coverage with a minimum number of test cases. We can check on static data for helping with our white box testing. We can wrap function calls, unique technology to our tool. And of course, we've got our results. Some of our customers, probably a lot of whom you've heard of. If you wish an evaluation, please talk to me afterwards. And that's it from me. Is there any questions? Yeah.